Hello, world. Welcome to the newest episode of the ERC podcast, where we help small to medium sized businesses either grow their top line or be more efficient. Today, I am honored to have here Orest Sison. Orest is the current owner and president of CMIT Solutions of the Meadowlands, where he helps provide managed IT services and cloud services for small, medium sized businesses. Previously, he was the lead for the computer security incident response team at Howard Brown Health, where he was making sure that there was no major cybersecurity threats and keeping everybody safe. Orest, welcome. Anything I may have missed?
No, not at all. Thank you very much, Joe. It's a pleasure to be on here. It's a pleasure to interact with you professionally and personally every time I see you, and very excited to be on the podcast in general.
Excellent. So if you for those who may have not seen episodes in the past, we've had folks in the digital media space. This is pretty clear to see if you invest in certain media presence, you may grow your top line. That's clear. We also had some sales leaders on how to better network, again, growing the top line. Orest, you're one of the first ones that goes into the second part where we can help a business be more efficient or be more proactive on some back office work. So when you meet someone at the Chamber of Commerce, and let's just say they have, I don't know, 7-person law firm, and they're like, I use Google Workspace and Dropbox and DocuSign, you know, can I benefit from your services? Can you help me understand what an IT service provider does and what could do for this law firm, as an example?
Thank you very much, Joe. And that is a great question because within that size of business, and because you listed a lot of cloud native solutions, um, typically one of my favorite plays to make is if they do have an on-premise email server, an on-premise web server with their own locally hosted website. That typically is something where you're able to find savings, where you're able to essentially get rid of a large piece of hardware that isn't being used to its full capacity and has an expensive, typically they come with backups that create, more overhead because you have to pay an ongoing fee to the backup company in order to back them up. But if they're already in the cloud, for example, a lot of what it boils down to is licensing. So because you mentioned that there is Dropbox, there is Gmail, and within law firms especially, they have their own different practice management softwares. They have their own file storage softwares outside of Google Workspace even. And as an IT service provider, you not only help end users with whatever types of computer issues that they might have connecting to printers, resetting passwords and things like that, but you have a larger view of the essentially what they call the SaaS sprawl, the software as a service sprawl. One of the first ways that I like to add value whenever I meet a client is if I'm able to get credentials and build some trust, I'm able to look into where they're spending their software spend. And typically there are a lot of overlaps that aren't necessary. And you are able to save a little bit of money if you're even just having visibility into all of your subscriptions, because we've all been there where we don't necessarily cancel our subscriptions when in our personal lives, for example. But in a business sense, this issue does scale, especially as you have employees coming and going and you're not reassigning licenses, when your headcount is growing and you're not able to keep it all on the same spreadsheet, or just simple error.
Okay. No, that helps a lot. And so, there's the you don't know what you don't know. There may be some of the intimidation of what is in the world of IT. What are a couple examples you can help folks who are listening say, maybe I've been sitting on this data for the firm over 10 years, 15 years. Maybe I could use it to bring better reporting or to make better collateral to say, hey, if we use the law firm example, we've done 2,300 cases in Bergen County, and we have a 98% success rate. Maybe they don't know these metrics, or they just say like we mostly win, or maybe with the operations, like help plant some seeds for folks who maybe not don't know what's possible.
I'm very, very glad that you asked that question, Joe. When it comes to data, It all depends on where it lives. So a lot of law firms that I interact with that are on the cutting edge, they have a practice management software where pretty much the CRM functionality, the lead generation functionality, the case management software functionality, and even document drafting all exists within one platform. And because the systems like that are vertically integrated in a way that is, coherent with how a law firm actually operates, there are already platforms, especially in the legal space, like, for example, Lawmatics, Practice Panther, that do a lot of that natively. However, as practices scale, and especially outside of law, where there aren't necessarily coherent practice management softwares, depending on where the data lives, being able to bring all of these different and disparate data pools together in order to make these reports is an underrated and highly effective and high leverage IT project that can be taken because, like you mentioned, if you have track, for example, where your largest sources of referrals come from for business, and you understand which relationships represent the biggest portion of your business, it becomes easier to organize and strategically plan for the future of your business. Business intelligence, especially in the age of AI, has become a major touch point because especially companies that have used these practice management softwares over time and haven't necessarily had the expertise with the tools or even the awareness of what can be done with the data don't know what can happen if data is all migrated into a central either software or central database that allows you to act on it. So even outside of the law firm example, because a lot of these legal practice management applications do have built-in reporting, um, there are also very flexible products from Microsoft where if you are a Microsoft shop, you have your data in Excel sheets, you have your data across even Google Sheets you can transport back into Microsoft environments. And if you use the Microsoft Power Suite, even if you aren't necessarily an IT professional, you are able to build in-depth technical reports that reflect the questions that you as a business owner or you as a practice manager have. When you do have data that isn't structured, however, like emails, information located in PDFs, information located in Word documents, etc., that is when it is better to bring in an IT expert who's better at data ingestion at scale. And especially if you have long email histories or a long history of closed cases, etc., that aren't in Excel sheets, that aren't in these easily readable formats, that is when you would be able to bring in an IT professional who is able to extrapolate some of the data from those cases.
Excellent. I think sometimes the IT space I could see as an offensive or a defensive play. So offensive would be how do we make better use of our data? How do we then leverage it to then make better business decisions? How do we become more efficient? I'm sure there's points that you can talk about that of uh, of making sure that everything's okay, or things become more efficient, less manual work. That's on the offensive side. Can you talk a little bit on the defensive side? If you may have seen either in industry previous clients that come to you and say, "Hey, I was a victim of ransomware," or "Hey, I just got fined from whichever regulatory body because I did not adhere to X." Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I'm very glad that you did bring this up as well. Um, when it comes to cybersecurity, uh, cybersecurity is definitely a passion and a focus of mine. And working in especially the Chicago healthcare space before I even came and started my business here in New Jersey, um, there were two major incidents that really caught my eye and really highlight how the impact of cybersecurity can be felt because it's very much a when it rains, it pours kinds of thing. Because, I mean, when you think about the types of businesses that are affected, they do target not only the large businesses, but also the small businesses. It's between 70 and 80% of cyber attacks are done against what are classified as small and medium-sized businesses. And just because you are a smaller business doesn't mean that you're exempt from any type of cyber attack. And when it comes to the types of vulnerabilities that are exploited in the wild, the two biggest hospital cyber attacks that I remember working in the Chicago healthcare space were Lurie Children's Hospital and Erie Health. And both of them were from very basic things that everybody can and should know better than to do in terms of cyber education, that do have basic and documented workarounds, not necessarily workarounds, but safeguards to prevent something like that from happening. And they were both massively, massively impactful, both in terms of cybersecurity and in terms of the compliance fallout. At Lurie Health, no, Chicago Children's Hospital, which Lurie Children's Hospital. There we go. Because there's Erie and Lurie. I just mixed those up. So at Lurie Children's Hospital, there was a USB drive that contained some malware on it, and an employee plugged it in, and the ransomware spread across the entire system, and they pretty much locked down the entire hospital until they paid the ransom. And there's so many ways that you can set up rules on every single device in an organization that would mean that you'd have to call your IT department before anybody plugs in a USB drive, just so that you get the okay, because we live in an era of like email and Dropbox. Nobody needs to be plugging in random USB drives without the IT department. But this happened at the end of the day. It caused this massive fallout. And on top of that, the HIPAA violation that resulted from this was pretty much just the icing on the cake, because the way that a lot of cyber attacks work is the cyber attack and the HIPAA violation, they come in tandem. You get hit by both at once. The payment that you need to make to the cyber criminals is pretty much as great, if not greater, than the payment that you would need to make to HIPAA officials. And because these are cyber criminals, they're here to twist your arm. Even if you don't necessarily notify HIPAA that there's been a breach, part of the ransom this is part of just every single ransomware playbook, that if you do ransom a healthcare organization, you're able to ultimately notify HIPAA on their behalf and say, hey, we just ransomed this organization. They've had a HIPAA violation. You should go and check that out. So like I said, like when it rains, it pours. And Lurie Children's Hospital, they were out of commission for several weeks. There were kids that needed life-saving medication that was being prescribed on computers that were locked. And it was just a horrible, horrible thing. And I mean, when it comes to Erie Health, they had an issue where an admin password on every single computer, there's something called a local admin password that's different from the overall admin, because there's an admin that exists above your organization and he has all types of privileges, but there's also a local admin, which means you'd be able to do anything on that computer specifically. But what happens is a lot of organizations, they get lazy and they give the same local admin password to every single computer because they're setting them up manually. And this is something that isn't done anymore, but especially if you've been in business for 15 years and you aren't familiar with the technology, this is something that your IT guy might be doing. And because the one admin password was cracked using a very common attack, essentially they were able to get full control over every individual computer one at a time, and once again deploy ransomware, notify HIPAA. And these are two major hospital systems in Chicago. Like they should have the IT systems in place, the cybersecurity systems in place to prevent something like this. And if you talk to somebody that knows what they're doing, these will be some of like the low-hanging fruit, like the most basic things that most attackers do. People that know what attack threat patterns are, they will do this. It'll take them maybe 20 minutes total, if they know what they're doing, to implement these fixes. And these are just basic things that are missing. But it comes when people don't necessarily audit their systems, and it's just such a easy, high leverage thing to do. Audit your systems, understand where you're standing, understand where the attack patterns are coming from, talk to somebody that knows what they're doing, get the fixes in, and continuously build a cybersecurity system that updates itself when new attack patterns emerge. But yeah, this is how larger businesses are affected. And small businesses, it's even more scattershot and easy to exploit. But I
Yeah.
digress.
No, that's great. I mean, it also shows your passion for the subject, and a hospital being out of commission for weeks is devastating. I'm curious. Like, I know for certain applications, let's say if Dropbox, DocuSign wants to be able to service the healthcare space, they need to get HIPAA certified through like Vanta or go through audits to make sure they could have healthcare healthcare providers be using their products. So, at what point does the HIPAA organization check in on hospitals or other providers that have PII or healthcare information and make sure that they adhere to the modern day standards for basic security?
So, at least on the HIPAA side, most of it is on a complaint basis. So people will file, for example, if they feel wronged, even outside of the tech world, if somebody feels that their doctor is divulging information, they personally have to make a complaint to HIPAA because there are so many medical organizations in America where it's not where it's like the IRS doesn't audit you every single year. If there's something suspicious, you will be flagged. But when it comes to in maintaining HIPAA compliance on our own, there are manual security risk assessments. There are templates released by HIPAA where you are able to essentially,
Self-assess yourself.
yeah, self-assess, describe the state of your current situation. And when it comes to being audited, these are typically the first documents that are checked when it comes to being able to prove your compliance. When you don't do it, that's usually a red flag. If the assessor comes and you haven't conducted your annual mandated security risk assessment. And if you also aren't necessarily familiar with what each control or what each mandatory document, like a disaster recovery plan and incident response plan, what each of these mandated documents or controls requires of you, you may accidentally misrepresent yourself when it comes to the how do you say, to the way that you think that you're representing yourself on the security risk assessment document. So
Yeah,
running these assessments definitely is more helpful when you have full confidence that you're meeting each of the standards, but there are templates where you are able to self-attest.
that's super helpful. I mean, that could be a tip for folks out there who are in regulated spaces, whether working for government or finances or healthcare. And you brought up a good point. I mean, there are there's thousands of providers, urgent cares, hospitals, doctor's office, private practices. I mean, those are really hard for. It's impossible to keep everyone audited yearly. But I guess for the Dropbox example, Dropbox has millions of users, so those are very checked. I'm assuming, and I guess like hospitals that want the credibility, that want to be safe, will ask Dropbox, "Are you HIPAA compliant?" before using that tool. So that's super helpful. So if we shift back to the offensive side, or the growth side, or the operation efficiency side, what are some things that as a small business owner, I could be listening in for and thinking like, oh, maybe I got to look into an IT person. I don't have one right now. Is it, hey, my team of six, we've got two people in the truck and two people in back office, and then the salesperson is the owner and then misses calls, and that could be an issue? Or is it that closing the books takes like, what are some signs of, hey, this could be better if I make the investment or if I look into this more?
Thank you, Joe. You're throwing me beautiful alley oops right now. I love it. When it comes to our most valuable resource, what I hear a lot of business owners say is time. And when it comes to being able to automate parts of your workflow, that is definitely one of the more interesting and exciting aspects of IT that does currently exist. Um, when we talk about data entry, if you have lots of documents that are, well, lots of onboarding documents, for example, lots of different fields. If you have a PDF, for example, where each of your clients manually writes out each different piece of information, checks off each box, and you have it on paper. Okay, that's great. This is how you've done it for the last 15 to 20 years. Now what? Being able to do something small in terms of a project like digitizing your onboarding and being able to take your client data and securely store it in a way that allows you to act on the information later, whether it's through a software, whether through it's a custom build or anything else like that, depending on how you run your business. That is one of the most high leverage things that you can do, because if you have your data gathered digitally, it's easy for you to use it in other parts. If you need to fill out paperwork for them down the line, if you need to, how do you say, charge their credit card without having to manually call them or write out all of their different information through a secure payment processor. All of these different things do buy you time up front. When it comes to, like you said, client response, there's definitely solutions on the market already when it comes to automatically replying to emails, summarizing emails that give you a view of your inbox so you know which emails you have to respond to first. Because we've all woken up to that morning where we have 50 different emails. You spend 45 minutes going through one of them, and then somebody who's very, very important and high on your priority list has like, can we talk in 15 minutes? I have like a busy day, and you miss that out. There's what else? When it comes to also like the AI receptionists as well, that has been one of the more common, albeit newer AI technologies that is reliable with simple businesses where all you have to do is schedule, for example, not so much for the Q&A, because Q&A does require a little bit more time on the back end in order to train the robot to understand which data is allowed to be shared, depending on how much data you feed it and what types of questions it will be asked of. But the main category of IT projects that will save you the most time and ultimately reduce manual data entry errors do have to do with client onboarding and employee onboarding. And if you're able to automate both of those processes and standardize them, then that is typically where I've noticed the biggest time gains from the clients that I've worked with in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think a really good in to again break the enigma or break the what's so not taboo but intimidating. Like the intimidation factor could be asking a small business owner at a chamber event and be, "Hey, how many missed calls did you have from potential clients this week?" And if the answer is more than two, I could almost guarantee that, speaking with you, speaking with an IT resource and say, hey, I know there's market solutions out there with AI answering machines, but I may not want to put the time into getting it installed properly and scaring them away if a prospect's like, oh, this I was trying to talk to Orest, but now I'm talking to an AI. Like, I don't want this. Being able to speak with you, a professional, to say, hey, let's do a small scoped engagement. We're going to have a new phone number that anybody could call to for your business. And if it'll go to you, and if it rings a certain amount of times, it will go to the AI executive assistant, and they'll log for you in the format that you need the fact that you need to call them back after, or at least give you, like, it could get to all the way to the point where they maybe get scheduled already, right? If it's a electrician or a mover, it's like, I mean, if the price is right and it's like, hey, I don't know, my outlets are out, I need someone here now, they can maybe get them on the books and scheduled for an in-house visit. So are those things that you think about, that you offer? Are those things that, folks that can listen to this podcast can think about?
Absolutely. And in terms of how these types of solutions work, is they all stack on top of each other. If you're able to have at the top of your funnel, you're able to have automatic email replies, automatic WhatsApp replies, automatic AI receptionist, you retain more people at the top of your funnel. You gather their information through the conversations, And because the information is gathered digitally, you're able to move them into whatever CRM software you have. If you have an ERP software where you have client relationships mapped to certain different types of products or services that you're receiving and processing, being able to automate the moving of data from all the way at the top of your funnel, being able to maintain a clean record all the way through the middle of your funnel, all the way through the end where your services are being completed, and having each step tracked, each step measured, each step analyzed and recorded, then, like you mentioned, it gives you this business intelligence view. It gives you a view for demand planning. It gives you a view for how your marketing is going and what marketing levers you're pulling that are moving things downstream. Having all of it recorded and centralized in a system is really where the next steps, or even at the enterprise level, this is a burgeoning field. And with, the ability to integrate all of these systems effectively comes just tremendous amount of visibility and leverage.
Wonderful. I want to give you a couple minutes to do some shameless plug. So, Orest, I'm a small business owner. Can you help me with IT security review? Can you help me do certain IT scopes? Do you do any app development? Tell us where to find you. Give the red carpet's out here for you.
Thank you, thank you. Very much appreciated. For small businesses, I would say the most important things are, I like how Joe mentioned I like how you mentioned, I'm speaking second person right now, but I do like the defense and the offense, because when it comes to growth is the most important thing that I see. And when it comes to being able to grow, having more time on what you do best, less time on the admin work, the follow up, um, picking up the phone, things like that. I definitely have had the most success with my clients in implementing solutions like that. And I do feel that it is one of the biggest time savers that you can invest in terms of you as a business owner, and things that eat up your time that you don't want eating your time. All of that admin work that can be automated should be automated. In terms of defense, um, I would say that the most effective defense that you can have is good documentation and common sense cybersecurity education. So when it comes to staying educated, there are a lot of resources that you can use, but the one that I personally recommend is something that's a little bit more hands-on and interactive and less academic. Um, there are resources online that you can use and do fulfill the requirements for both HIPAA and the FTC safeguards. The one that I am have that's near and dear to my heart is one called CyberHoot. It's pretty much a cybersecurity education for people that don't necessarily want to get too deep into cybersecurity. They just want to be able to understand what the threats look like and what the best reactions are to it. So they're in simulated environments that replicate what you'd be seeing on a day-to-day basis. They give you a better sense for identifying AI language or specific types of email attacks, like if there's a domain impersonation, etc., things like that. Common sense, practical cybersecurity education that really does elevate you above being a mark. And having that is definitely, I would say, the most important thing, because you can have all the different software in the world, automated this, AI that, and if you just respond to a bad email that lands in your inbox, then I mean, that's how most people get caught. And if that's how most people get caught, and you can just close that one door permanently by staying educated, being aware of what threats exist, that is the best and most high leverage way that you can keep yourself safe.
Wonderful. Orest, I'll end it here, but appreciate the time.
I appreciate the opportunity. Wonderful questions, and always great talking with you. Always great working with you, and I'll be seeing you around.
See you around.